This concrete retaining wall has a hidden feature built into it to make it much lighter than normal concrete retaining wall block, but also very structurally sound. If you want to know how we did it, keep on watching. Let's get started.
We've all seen an old, ugly retaining wall, but this retaining wall has been around since the 1950s. It's seen better days, and these small to large size slabs of rock actually complement my driveway, just not this side. This side we need something more substantial, especially since I'm going to be redoing the side of the grass that you see here. There certainly wasn't any type of proper backfill with this type of rock back in the 50s when they first did it, which is obviously why grass and weeds grows straight through the holes in between each side of rock. Now, due to the driveway slope, the rocks tend to start small and get larger and larger as you get closer to the house. The first few rocks are quite manageable in terms of size and weight, but the further we get, the heavier it is, and that's when I bring in the big guns. Now, if you recognize this machine and this driveway, it's because I previously renovated this entire stretch of the yard. This is the side yard that I put in a grid system, and I rented a sizable bobcat to be able to remove all of the grass. But simultaneously, I figured if I'm able to use it to remove the grass, I'm also simultaneously going to be using it to remove these large sizable rocks as well. If you're wondering what type of bucket I'm using on this bucket, it is distinctly named Rock Bucket. Yep, that is what it's called, and it's perfect for rocks such as this because these rocks are quite heavy. I do provide quite a bit of assistance to get some of these rocks into the bucket because we are in a very tight space and right next to the house, but we're able to manage to get some of these rocks in and onto the opposite side of my driveway where I'm able to repurpose these rocks perfectly on the much more substantial retaining wall side, which is the opposite side of my driveway. This is actually very nice because otherwise I'd have to figure out what to do with these large rocks, but because this rock matches perfectly with the rock adjacent to it, and just build up the height on this side of the retaining wall, which in all honesty works perfectly in this situation. With all of our rock removed and accounted for, I can switch over to a more traditional bucket on the Bobcat and start smoothing and grading this side of the yard. Now, this was the original reason why I rented this Bobcat, but it certainly makes life a whole lot easier with the retaining wall as well if you're able to account for this, since I'm not doing everything myself. Now, we are having to dig up a considerable amount of soil in this area because we want to make sure we have plenty of space for proper drainage. Now, with any renovation, everything is always unique and different, which is why there's always stumbling blocks that we have to account for. Case in point, here's a little segment of Inside Baseball when trying to figure out how to lay everything out.
So I got myself in a predicament, and it tends to happen on every project, just this one's a little bit unique because right around here is where my retaining wall is going to be in terms of like getting to this height all the way to there. But what do we do around here? It's a little messy with asphalt. I have a number of things that I have to work around at that point. So I'm thinking now that I'll be breaking up the retaining wall video and the driveway video differently. So, you just have to kind of navigate what I'm going to do here and figure out exactly how I'm going to do it. But I also have large equipment that's being rented on a daily basis, which is expensive. So I want to make sure that the driveway gets attention first. So I'm probably going to do the driveway now, then we'll come back around and finish up this little retaining wall space. So stay tuned for that, but all in all, fun stuff. Oh, let me know if you actually want to see like these weird segments, on a video basis, just because it tends to happen, like I said, once or twice during each and individual project, and it just makes it a little bit more realistic because not all projects are easy. Editing makes everything look easy, but in reality, not so much.
With any project I take on, it's always a much smoother process if we have the proper foundation to work upon. And that coincides perfectly with the foundation for a retaining wall, because that is extremely important to get right before we even lay down a single brick. I'm digging 3 to 4 inches below the level of our asphalt driveway, and that way we have plenty of room to bring in our crushed rock, which is going to provide a structurally sound base for our retaining wall blocks to sit upon. One key element that a lot of people tend to forget when doing a concrete retaining wall is the layering process to make sure that our soil doesn't protrude into our drainage area. Now this can be cumbersome, especially when you have multiple sides to account for where soil is in comparison to where your retaining wall block and drainage rock is going to be. So I have one layer at the bottom, one layer on the side, and we're even going to have more layers at the top because our grass driveway area is still going to be grass at the tail end of the project. In terms of the rock that I'm using in this application, I'm using 5/8 crushed minus rock, which basically means that there is, generally speaking, no larger pieces than 5/8 inch thick or wide, but there's a lot of miscellaneous small particles in it, which basically means that you're able to compact it very easily, which is perfect for a foundation like this. I level out our base as best as possible and bring in a plate compactor. Now this is basically the smallest plate compactor I could find for this area because it is a very small, tight-knit space, but we're able to get substantial compaction with a plate compactor like this. You could do this technically with a hand tamper, but it really doesn't give you the best overall compaction that you want, especially when it comes to a retaining wall. Once compacted, I double check my levelness to try and get it as smooth of a grade as possible before we bring in our retaining wall blocks. The most time-consuming part when laying block is going to be the very first row you install. You want to guarantee and make sure that this first row is perfectly level and straight so all the other blocks above it can be plopped right on top with very minimal adjustments needed. Basically meaning the more precise we are in this first row, the less headaches we're going to have in the rows above it. Keep in mind that it is good practice to have your first row of retaining wall actually below grade, or at least somewhat below grade. But in this circumstance, the first couple of rows here, I can't because I have a drainage grade in the driveway at this point and I can't go down any further. But this below grade situation will be somewhat addressed as we move our way up the driveway, because we're going to have to stagger our rows as we move up the driveway, but more on that later. In terms of leveling, I do make plenty of small micro adjustments, and then my finishing touch is to take a rubber mallet and give it a few love taps for final positioning. In order to make life just a little bit easier in terms of alignment, I do take a string line and just string it across the face of the brick. That way I know for certain that our lineup is going to be perfectly straight all the way up the side of our driveway, and I can easily align the face of each one of these bricks with the string line. The block that I went with on this project is a smooth face 16 by 12 inches deep. And as you can see, these blocks are hollow on the inside, and that makes life a lot easier that you wouldn't expect. Number one, it's specifically much lighter. If these blocks were solid, they'd probably be closer to 65 pounds, but because they're hollow on the inside, they're only approximately 45 pounds. Plus, they're a lot easier to handle and manage because you basically have a built-in handle for each one of these blocks. And these blocks, it's not about the overall weight sometimes, it's more about the awkward nature of handling and getting into unique positions when trying to lay each one of these down. As you can see, the second row of block is going extremely quickly in comparison to the first. The only thing is that this sloped driveway is making life just a little bit more difficult.
Now I did eventually know that I was going to run into this issue, although I didn't think I was going to run into it quite this soon, but so be it. It's because of the angle of the driveway where we're inevitably going to hit an area where we're either going to have a little bit of crushed base showing right here, or we're going to have to dig down further and put a block even further down at this location.
As you can see, I chose option B because I wanted to dig down further so there was no clear sign of any crushed rock from eyesight at the driveway. When digging down, I account for the overall depth of our block, but I'm also making sure that we have room for crushed base in order to guarantee that we have still a solidified base underneath our concrete foundation block. We of course give our block a few love taps to solidify it in place, and once we like the overall positioning, we can move on to the next one. But please keep in mind that with all these, we should be checking for levelness on both directions because we certainly don't want this thing tipping one way or the other. Due to the slope of the driveway making our block placement even more severe, instead of digging down, we're actually going to be filling up this section with more crushed rock, leveling it out, tamping it down, and then placing our next block, which is technically row 2, since it's going to be above the first row. With a few love taps, we're set in place, and we can move on to the opposite side of a retaining wall where we first started. In order to provide strength within our retaining wall, we want to make sure we have a staggered bond pattern. That means that the seams don't line up with each other, and in order to provide that pattern, we have to cut every other row in half, which can be easily done with a circular saw and a diamond disc. As you can see, this does get quite dusty, so make sure when you're doing this, you have proper PPE, so a respirator, gloves, eye protection, and ear protection as well. Now my circular saw blade isn't quite as thick as it needs to be in order to cut all the way through each one of these sides, but it's so weakened and it's concrete, so it basically just snaps exactly where you cut it in the first place. Another nice feature with these retaining wall blocks is that it has a self-aligning rear lip, which offers stability and correct alignment without guessing when you place it on top of the next row. As always, if you're interested in any of the tools or materials that you see in this video, I'll make sure and have a link for those items in the description box below. At this stage, it's extremely gratifying because all of our hard work on that first row really pays off in dividends when we're getting to these top rows because they go in so much faster. We spend very little time leveling because everything's already leveled to begin with. Now we are going to dump a large amount of drainage rock in the back side of this retaining wall, but in order for a little bit of extra moisture to be accounted for, a perforated flexible drainage hose is placed on the back side of the retaining wall. Now this is really just to account for excess moisture, and if it was a much more sizable retaining wall, I would obviously have this hose being connected into some type of catch basin. But with this being such a small retaining wall to begin with, we're just trying to be mindful of having a space for some of that excess moisture to go into. But the real star of the show when it comes to drainage is this drainage rock. Now this is smooth drainage rock that's 3/4 inch rounds, and this rock not only provides an extremely structurally sound base, it also provides a very easy way for all that excess moisture to drain downward into the soil. Now, as I was installing the retaining wall blocks, you might have thought to yourself, Brent, these blocks are lighter, therefore are they as strong? Well, they are, especially when considering that you're just filling up the empty space with rock, which not only adds rigidity to the system, but also provides even further drainage protection. As we fill up the remaining area of the retaining wall, keep in mind that this is a bit of a unique circumstance because we're going to be pouring dirt right on top of this entire driveway, which is again why I'm applying another layer of weed barrier protection so all this soil doesn't automatically go directly into our rock and fill up our drainage rock, which is the last thing we want at this point. If you're wondering what this unique grid system is, it's a product from a company called Votolan, and this is their Easy Pave gravel and grass driveway grid system. This is a really nice feature to have on any lawn or gravel driveway, especially if you're planning on driving large heavy pieces of machinery or just cars or trailers. But after a few months of constant watering, we have a beautiful grass driveway that you never would notice any type of grid that's buried underneath it. With my grass accounted for, I picked up some concrete retaining wall cap at my local Lowe's, cut it on one side because I wanted one side perfectly flat so that it could be pushed up against the house. I used the same diamond circular saw blade that I used previously, cut it perfectly smooth, and moved on to the next piece. Now this is the beauty of this system, is that each side of these caps have approximately a 15-degree, which basically means that one face is wider than the other, and we have to swap sides at every single one if we are going in a straight pattern, but that all changes when we get to the very end. In all honesty, I didn't measure this ahead of time, and I was hoping that I'd have just a little extra top cap to cut off at this end, but I was unfortunately just short a couple of inches, so I had to rethink how I was going to lay out this side. In order to do so and make it look appealing and not a mistake, I mirrored the 15-degree edge that is already on the brick on a smaller section of it. That way I'm still able to utilize that 15-degree mark and put those pieces together in a cohesive way that makes sense with the arrangement of our yard. By lining up those two 15-degree sides in the same direction, I was able to also purposely and gracefully make that curve at the end of our retaining wall and proceed with a straight run all the way down the rest of it. This of course means that we have to measure and cut the final piece again, but that's not a big deal, especially with this being a straight cut as well. But with that, we are done with this beautiful, sexy beast of a concrete retaining wall. The only thing is, and this is a unique caveat to this project unlike any other video I've done, is that I'm not a massive fan of this flat-faced brick that is right next to my veneered brick on the house. I love the red brick that is on the house, but the retaining wall block really doesn't complement the red brick the way I was hoping for. So, if you made it this long, please let me know in the comment section what you think and if I should just veneer over the retaining wall block. Definitely would consider it if you all thought that would be the right direction for this project.